I suspect that many of you in this congregation who have given homilies have come to this podium with a little bit of fear and trepidation. And this is certainly how I feel standing before you today. Besides the usual pressures of wanting to say something of substance and relevance, a few extra things have added to my anxiety. First of all, just 2 days ago, a group of the people in this room heard me speak at a health and housing conference forum at the Karandalat Center. And since most of my talks have the same theme, I'm a bit nervous that some of you may become bored. So if that's the case, enjoy the nap. More stressful is the fact that Mary Loris gave the homily during last year's All Saints' Day liturgy. It was one of the most powerful homilies I've ever heard. And with the exception of today's second reading, last year's texts were the same as today. So if you really want a great All Saints' Day homily, I encourage you to read Mary Loris's from last year. But then to add even more pressure, last week when I approached Matt Gladhue after Mass to thank him for his excellent homily, he said, quote, "I am just John the Baptist setting the stage for your homily next week." Now that's pressure. I better bring my A game to talk about the B attitudes. Read Mary Loris's homily, like I said. Nevertheless, I am here in front of you on one of our major celebrations to share my reflections. Here with all of our community, broadly defined in body and spirit, assembled as part of the communion of saints. My first reflection is that the last time I gave a homily here was 23 days short of 2 years. My righteous focus at that time was on how charity too often overwhelms justice. The following day, Sally, my wife of 48 years, died. And I was overwhelmed and became acutely aware of how important charity is in this world. And there are times when charity needs to overwhelm justice. Sally and I were blessed with the charity of this community before her death, and those blessings have continued unabashedly to the present. For that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you. This experience highlights the reality that charity and justice are not in opposition to each other. They should not be seen as an either-or duality, but as part of a continuum which also embraces love and compassion and hope. A continuum that is necessary for us to create a humane and loving world for everyone. Now, Sally's picture is on the wall today along with those of many other saints who no longer bless us with their physical presence, but who are tangibly with us today in every way, individually and collectively. To me, the most beautiful and touching song of our entire liturgical year is the Litany of the Saints that we sang today. Mary Loris's beautiful voice highlights each individual saint, and then carries us to what for me is the most powerful phrase in all of our prayers, when we collectively, as a community, sing, "All you holy, faithful people, pray for us." Individual saints are gracefully embedded into a larger community context, into the entirety of the communion of saints, where God is most powerfully and fully present. The feelings I get when I sing that phrase at the end of each verse reinforce my bias that both health and holiness, words that come from the same root, are not individual attributes, but qualities of the community in which people live. Because one cannot be healthy or holy without community. Poet Wendell Berry says, quote, "The community in the fullest sense is the smallest unit of health. To speak of the health of an isolated individual is a contradiction in terms. I believe the same can be said about holiness. The community in the fullest sense is the smallest unit of holiness. To speak of the holiness of an isolated individual is a contradiction in terms. Holiness is in relationships. That is why the Feast of All Saints and the Communion of Saints are so powerful." And that brings me to today's readings, which I believe reinforce that notion. In Revelations we hear, quote, "God's dwelling place is with humanity. God will dwell with them, and they shall be fully present and shall be fully present among them. In other words, God's dwelling place is in community, and that is where God is fully present. Likewise, the gospel I hear community in the familiar litany of the Beatitudes. You didn't hear, blessed is the person who is poor in spirit, or blessed is the person who mourns, or the person who is weak or hungers or thirsts. Instead, you heard Christ speaking collectively. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. I don't think it was just for rhetorical or stylistic purposes that Matthew used plural pronouns in reporting what he heard from Christ. I believe Christ was speaking about people in community of peacemakers, a community of those persecuted, a community of merciful, a community which hungers and thirsts for justice. As we know, Christ at his core was a revolutionary. He was an agitator and a community organizer who recognized that only through collective action can people gain enough grace, another word for power, to change community values, which can lead to the creation of the new holy city that John saw in Revelations. A holy city where everyone can be comforted and filled and receive mercy and thrive. That organizing has gone on for over 2,000 years and needs to continue today more than ever. That's why the Feast of All Saints and the communion of saints are so powerful. Health is in relationships, in community. But there's another way of looking at the phrasing of the Beatitudes. Perhaps Matthew was prescient and thinking 2 millennia ahead of time to a time when the pronouns they, them, their could be either singular or plural, or maybe even both at the same time. In a very subtle way, using they, them, their, and embracing the idea of gender fluidity, Matthew forces us out of the binary thinking that pervades every other aspect of our lives. Focuses out of the dichotomous beliefs that keep us separate from parts of ourselves and from the broader community. Forces us to reevaluate how we think of the world and our place in it. Forces us to rethink our notion of dualities, like charity and justice, which I treated as a duality in my last homily, or Pharisee or publican, like Matt's reflection last week when he thought he was both. Us, them, black, white, liberal, conservative, urban, rural, male, female, teacher, learner, beginnings, endings, individual, community, and on this Feast of All Saints, even saint, sinner. Sheep and goats notwithstanding, in God's world there are no dualities. We are all part of the whole of God's creative artistry, part of the communion of saints in all of its complexity and diversity. Perhaps in the communal sense, we are all they, them, because we are part of a broader us. And to speak of the health and holiness of an isolated individual is a contradiction in terms. Health and holiness are in relationships, in community. Thinking of ourselves as a communal they, them also forces us out of the notion of the either-or duality of life and death, and puts us in a different relationship with those who have physically left us. That notion brings me to the reading of Francis Buechner's Sacred Journey. He says of the communion of saints, quote, they live still in us. It is as if they carry something of us on their way as we assuredly carry something of them on ours. There is no duality. We are in an ongoing and complex relationship with our departed brethren, part of the continuum of past, present, and that which will be. Buechner says, quote, death can never put an end to our relationship with them. It is beyond a doubt that they live still in us, end quote. That's what makes us all a part of the communion of saints, a community of saints. As Wendell Berry says, a proper community is a commonwealth. It answers the needs, practical as well as social and spiritual, of its members. Among them, the need to need one another. We need the saints, and they need us, if we are to transform all of creation into a world of health and holiness. We need their example, their legacy, and their foundational work if we are to carry on. And they need us to carry on, to assure that their time on earth and that their legacy that they left continues to be transformational. So I'll trust in the words of Frederick Buechner, who opined that we should not only remember them as they used to be, but as seeing and hearing them as they are now. If they had things to say to us then, they have things to say to us now. So in that light, Sally, I'm listening. I was hoping, never in your life were you shy about sharing your opinions, so please let me know if I did an adequate job today. Happy all stay.